Hello guys, welcome to today's tutorial. Our task for today is gonna figure out how we can transform any shape into an assortment of letters. Basically figuring out how we can materialize a line of text or a message, for example, in a creative manner. So yeah, this is gonna be a fun one, and let's get into it. Right, let's start out by creating a shape layer. Can head over here, add in a shape layer on this side, and you can pick any shape that you want. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'm gonna still just use a regular square. So hold shift and double click on this rectangular tool, and down in the rectangle path options over here, I'm gonna drag down the size of the rectangle. So this is gonna be our maximum size for this example. Right now I'm gonna estimate that the animation is just gonna last for about 2 seconds. So I'm gonna select the shape layer over here, hit S, and it's gonna drag up the scale property for us, and that's what we're gonna animate. Gonna drag it over here to maybe 12 frames, add a keyframe there, drag it down to the beginning, and add a keyframe where it's gonna be 0%. And now we get an animation of it popping up over here. Maybe scoot a little bit back about 3 frames, and then add a property where it goes up to 110, somewhere around that, so we get a little bit of momentum coming up like that. And then at 1 second over here, gonna add in a little keyframe, and I'll scoot it over to about another 12 frame perhaps. Disable this constraint proportion over here, so then we can drag the scale out horizontally. This is how the square over here is going to transform into the text. Hang on, I'm going to change the color to something easier on the eye. There we go. Right. So our sequence now contains the square scaling out and then expanding outwards to either sides, and that's where the text is gonna jump in. Our job now is to create a new text layer. I'm gonna choose something that is moderate in size, but is also big enough to cover the entire square. Just a little message that says, like, just gonna type something that maybe a basic hello over here, and I'm gonna make sure it stays in the middle of the composition using the align tab. Now as you can see, it's already covering the sort of the outlines of the square shape. Right now we're gonna just put it out to maybe over here in the 4th keyframe. That's where the text is gonna appear out just in time for the transformation of the square to the text. I'm gonna drop the menu down and head over to animate, put in tracking. Where is it? Over here. And I'm gonna animate the amount of tracking over here. Basically, it sort of dictates the amount of tracking between each letter and the text. So I'm gonna put a keyframe over here, 0, which is gonna be our final position for each of the letters over here. Drag it out to maybe to the same position of the last keyframe of the shape. And then for the tracking amount, I'm going to drag that inwards until each of the letters in here are covered by the square. At this point, you can probably see where this is going. It's gonna animate out with the shape. We're gonna take a little time to finalize our animation a little bit over here. I'm gonna highlight all of these keyframes that we got down here and hit F9. And I'm gonna jump into the graph editor over here. Just put all these keyframes into a little bit of extremities over here to get a little bit more excitement in between each of the transformation, like that. Also, I'm gonna want to make sure this is a smooth curve as the square is transitioning from that sort of overshoot state, and then it's gonna slowly expand out. Let's just see that once again without the text. I kind of want this motion to maybe speed it up a little bit, then ease into its final position. That's pretty good. Right now I'm gonna go ahead and enable the text over here. I'm gonna do the same thing, highlight both of these keyframes, and what I'm gonna do is try and match the motion of the text with the motion of the square. So over here, the tracking amount should also be easing at the beginning a little bit. Gonna jump over here to the scale. It looks like the peak of the speed of the motion is where I'm putting the timeline indicator on. So I'm gonna try and match that there, just like, you know, just a little bit of a reference point. I just realized a bit of my camera just blocked off the whole keyframe operation over here, so I'm gonna highlight that to you guys again. This is what I tried to do earlier. I tried to match the tracking animation of the text with the expansion of the scale of the box over here. So we have like a sort of a boxed up look for the text. Now what I'm gonna do is select the text over here and take the eyedropper of the fill of the text and select the box on the outside so that we get a matching color for the text and the box. I'm gonna try and make the box disappear as soon as the text is expanding out. So I'm gonna head over to the shape layer, hit T, toggle keyframe on the opacity, and drag it down over here as soon as just sort of, you know, finish the whole expansion operation. Now I'm gonna ease that in as well. So we have this basic setup over here of, you know, of a box transforming into a text layer. What we actually wanted to happen is that the edges of the box and the text sort of merges into each other and create an unified form to give the illusion that the box itself, you know, is morphing into the text. So what I'm gonna do is head over to the top of the composition over here, create a new adjustment layer, and I'm gonna call this one choke. I'm gonna drag the beginning of the layer down to over here, you know, just for easier reference. What I'm gonna do now is add in an effect called matte choker. I'm gonna drag this to this layer over here, and what is already doing is sort of, you know, compressing the outside area matte of the layer or any of the object of the layer below. So right now what we're aiming for is that it's going to compress down the opaque area of the text and the shape over here. What I'm going to do is drag down the gray level softness down to 0% and drag up the geometric softness over here, you know, until we get to that in between moment of the text and the shape. That's gonna take a little bit of, you know, muddling around a little bit. As you can see over here, if I drag the choke layer, you can see a little bit of the edge of the O over here, along with the L, everything's starting to come out. You know, you got, we drag up the softness a little bit more and drag the choke up slightly. Over here, the timeline still want some more details of the square to pop out, so I'm going to drag down the choke level over here. After a little bit of muddling around, I arrived at these parameters. Specifically, I set the geo softness to 20 and the choke level to 108. Depending on what your setup looks like, you could go higher or lower, but I would say these numbers are great starting points. I then put keyframes on both of those properties to make the effect take effect more smoothly and match them with the end of the animation so we can return the letters to their final state. Right, this is looking kind of nice. I'm gonna put a keyframe onto both of these. Maybe drag the adjustment layer back up just a couple frames. Hit U to review the keyframe and put a couple of keyframes back here and put them all to 0. And then at the end over here, I'm gonna put these two keyframes of the choker and I'm gonna start to release them from the choke. And I'm gonna do that by copying these keyframes over here from the beginning and copy them to the end. And that's gonna sort of conclude our choking animation. That's really nice. And now I just want to sort of add a little bit of a garnishing right now. As you can see at the beginning of the transformation of the text from the square, we can actually see, I think over here, maybe a little bit too much of the details of the text. So what I'm gonna do is jump into the effects and preset and add in an effect called fastbox blur, and that's gonna help us to sort of, you know, dilute the edges of the text at the beginning a little bit, get to the end of the animation where, you know, the text sort of finish up dissolving from the square. Put a keyframe on the blur radius, and then at the beginning of the transformation, maybe just add a little bit of a blurring so that we don't see a lot of the details of the text. Maybe 26 is fine. Let's see how that looks. And at this sort of spot over here, I can see that, you know, the square is losing maybe too much details way too soon over here. So what I'm gonna do is take the opacity keyframe of the square and drag it out a little bit more, so that we still get some, you know, some remnant of the square inside of the transformation. Yeah, that's a lot smoother. So that's pretty much at the core foundation of what we're gonna do, is applying the matte choker into the transformation, into the setup that we had. Now we move on to a little bit of troubleshooting over here. As we know, as with any extreme choking event, it's gonna come with a little bit, you know, of jaggedy edges over here, as we can see on the matte. In order to remedy that, here's a little bit of, not actually a trick, but just a little workaround. What we're gonna want to do is head over to the effects and look for the simple choker effect. You can drag it down to the adjustment layer, and instead of choking it up, you can actually drag it to the other end, which is, instead of choking up the layer that we had, is actually expanding the area that is perceiving where the edges of the layer are. It will help us with the job of anti-aliasing a little bit, as well as it's gonna expand the area that has been choked up by the matte choker that went before. So, you know, it's sort of a two bird and one stone method over here. Drag that out to where it sort of matches, maybe -20 look nice. I don't want, you know, you don't want it to go a little bit too extreme, then it's gonna look like a little bit bubbly. Right now I don't have a problem with how it's coming up, but you know, we can do a little bit over here as it dissolves out. So put a little keyframe on the choke mat over here, on the choke mat of the simple choker, and drop it down to 0. So we get a nice dissolve of the text coming back to its original shape. Once you've arrived at this step, make sure to enable the transparency background. That's gonna give us a little bit of an idea what's the whole animation is gonna look like in a brighter environment. So right now, as you can see over here, this edge sort of expands out a little bit thanks to the simple choker. So I think the best thing we can do over here is probably animate so that the choke mat of the simple choker sort of ease in, instead of, you know, having it jump from one state to the other so abruptly. And you know, I don't really mind the dark edge of the matte over here a little bit, because we're gonna put a fill color on top of it anyway. And also I think that we should drag in the ending of the choke over here to match with the ending of the text expanding out, so that it doesn't leave a little bit of a tail end here for the effects. And also drag in the length of the adjustment layer as well to about over here when the square has finished, you know, dissolving in opacity right there. So that is looking good to me. And then put the animation into its own comp, pull up a background solid and put a fill effect over the entire animation. Then I use a pretty special plugin using one of the scripts over plugin played. It's called outlines. When you put that script into the composition of our animation over here, it's gonna create multiple stroke outlines for us pretty easy. This comes in pretty handy, since, you know, creating multiple outlines of an animation not an easy task in After Effects. So I kind of want to decorate this first. Hang on. And then to library, and you can actually select the color of each of the outlines. So, you know, over here kind of want to have like a sort of dissolve upwards, you know, 3D sort of arrangement. So where is that? Here. And then I'm gonna put a keyframe onto the stroke size, drag the size up a little bit more like that. Over here, I'm gonna start out with 0, and then I want the strokes to decrease in size as the text start to come out and finish dissolving from the box. So over here, let's just, that's pretty cool. Yeah, there we go. Link to the plugin down below in the description. And so yeah, that's pretty much wrap up my tutorial for today on, you know, transforming a shape layer into a line of text. And you can pretty much experiment this with any shape and any sort of array of text that you want. You know, just be aware of the size of the tracking amount, the size of the expansion of the shape. After all that, it should be good to go. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye bye.